This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 23rd of November 2022 at home in Wicklow. And the broad theme of the episode is the idea of tone. Tone. And I put it into a couple of different contexts. I speak about a funeral I attended recently and how well the priest managed the tone and struck the right tone to put everybody at ease. I look at tone in certain kinds of movies and talk about a couple of test cases there. I speak also about the auditory experience, where we meet sound and tone as vibration. And I talk then at the end of the episode about how the World Cup in Qatar keeps striking the wrong tone, and how we can see through the spin and the public relations nonsense. So there's all of that coming up. The piece that I didn't really include to try and tie it all together and make it more relevant to the ongoing kind of driver of the podcast, which is wellness, is to think about tone in terms of one's own life, one's own being. And what one's tone is. Like, what's your tone? What's the tone or timbre of your own life? What feels consistent? Because I think if you think of tone in that way, it can strike quite deep, and it's sort of the mood and the energy and the vibration that you bring to proceedings, or how you chime with the world and chime with life. Anyway, I didn't talk about that, but I talked about a lot of other things. So that's what's coming up. I hope you can find time to listen, and of course I hope you enjoy it. Okay, I'll see you around the corner. Cheers.
Not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for bringing your ears and yourself, the self that is attached to those ears, and the brain that lies between those ears, the heart that lies somewhere below those ears, and all the other physical attributes that allow you to be present, and maybe the other things that allow you to bring your mind to bear on whatever it is that brought you here. So yes, here we are. It's cold. It is cold. It's getting colder all the time. After some very mild wet weather, we're finally getting some cold, more winter-like days. It still feels like late autumn, even though it's coming to the end of November. I've been hugging the stove, embracing it like an old friend. Heat me, warm me, hold me close. So in brief, if this is your first time to visit the podcast, your first time to come and listen to the tell, what I do here is reflect on anything connected to wellness and coping in the world, and righting the ship of oneself. And it can be rambly, it can be spiky, it can be soggy, but I pretty much stay around that theme. The theme is survival. The team is survival. This is the survival team. That's the death team. Let's stay on the survival team because we want to survive. The theme, that's with a TH. The theme is survival. The tone is contemplative, reflective, sometimes amused, often bemused, definitely sometimes confused, diffused. So that's what goes on here. Explorations of emotional and psychological well-being, and trying not to get too pious and pompous and performative about it, but trying to keep it real as much as we can. Now, yeah, it's been a funny time, and not funny, funny, peculiar, funny, a little bit discombobulating, a little bit unsettling. Yeah, there's been some end of life experiences, and that stuff is challenging. There's no two ways about it. There is no two ways about it. There are no two ways about it. And just before I pressed record, I came in here to the little home studio in #blessed. 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 I came in here to record. I'm on the clock, as I have been for the last few weeks, just with it being kind of busy. But I just received a text to tell me a friend of the family passed away 2 nights ago. And a good friend of my parents, who was very much one of the crew, one of the group, at closer proximity at different times over the years. This was a guy who was a big fan of my wife's music and would regularly be present at her various gigs in the area over the years. One of my favourite memories of him is at my 21st in my parents' house. That would be 27, nearly 28 years ago. And I just have this I have this image of him ranting and railing at a room full of what he considered apathetic 20-year-olds or 21-year-olds or 22-year-olds, young people, young adults. And he would have been somewhat inebriated, but he was in no way incoherent, and he was close to, apoplectic is probably an unfair characterization of how angry he felt, but it was indignation, and it was passion, and it was disgust. And it was just a very unequivocal accusation of apathy directed at those present, which would have been my friends and maybe some cousins and whoever. And he was just kind of, get up, you've got to care, you've got to get involved, do something, and just standing there shouting. And I think even then I just instinctively understood. I didn't think he was a crank. I didn't think he was nuts. I thought, no, this is coming from a good place. It's coming from a real place of conscience and care, and a desire for the work to carry on. And he worked in news. He was a news editor for the national broadcaster here in Ireland. So I literally just got that news moments before pressing record, and it's it's challenging. It's challenging to suddenly, it feels like just to be losing people, these figures and these men, to whom I've been relatively close, even if from distance, to regard these men with affection. I mentioned last week how a member of the extended family passed away a couple of weeks ago, and I was in attendance at his funeral at the start of last week. And I mean, I'm happy to say it was a lovely funeral. It was really nice. And yes, it was a Catholic funeral, and there was probably a couple of hundred people in attendance, and various family members and friends and work colleagues and sports colleagues, people who had trained with this guy and had been trained by him, members of the Gaelic football fraternity community, who gave him a guard of honour as he was carried into the church. But to my great relief, I suppose, and a relief that grew to sort of admiration and generous amusement, the priest who officiated at the funeral service was an older Irish countryman. I didn't get to find out where he was from, but he just struck the right tone right from the off, and set the congregation at ease, and was just, he was funny but not inappropriate, and he just managed everything really well. And one of the things that impressed me most, there was a sort of an honesty to his, I think, an honesty to his reckoning of where faith sits in the modern Irish community, and of maybe where Catholicism sits in the contemporary Irish frame of reference. And he recognises it without being, well, certainly without presenting anger or judgment or disappointment or resentment of people who've turned away from the church. And there would have been many people in that congregation who I would have perceived as being non-churchgoers, or perhaps some I would have known personally who are atheists like myself. Very much a large secular contingent in the congregation, and the priest was able to look that straight in the eye and be unfazed, and recognise that faith and belief in the resurrection are not popular concepts, and certainly not as popular as they once were. And what really impressed me, that he was very clearly comfortable with his own position, and very clearly devoted to his vocation, and absolutely unafraid to bring a vitality to his representation of that belief and that faith. And there's I felt a steeliness and a resoluteness and an absolute comfort with his relationship with faith and his relationship with being a priest and being an advocate for faith and for the Catholic faith specifically. But he just brought a very, what I felt was a very thoughtful and compassionate and humanist interpretation or tone to how he incorporated the strength of his convictions into the sermon and into how he officiated. And it just made all the difference, because I've attended funerals when that hasn't been the case, and the priests have felt very out of touch and very removed from the feeling of the times, very removed from a real sense of connection or feeling for the people in front of them. And that to me feels like a dereliction of duty. It feels like a failure to interrogate their own beliefs and a failure to respect the people who come into the house of God, if you want to put it that way. So I was quite inspired and moved by this priest. I thanked him afterwards, and it really did help. I think help everyone sort of sit there with their grief and their love and their regard for the deceased, and sort of the priest kind of gave permission, I suppose, for. And I think this is what a strong faith should do. It gave people permission to be there and observe their farewell and observe their grief with dignity, with the space to feel welcome, and however they chose to be there, or whatever they brought, they were welcome. And I just thought that was nice. And I mean, the priest even, he said himself, he had to get a couple of people up from the congregation to help be ministers of the communion, and he sort of made the quip that we're not used to crowds like this around here, which was a very honest acknowledgement that congregations have dwindled and are not what they once were. And I think there are some of us who, to an extent, celebrate that. And that, I don't mean that in a mean-spirited way, but they celebrate, well, there's a rebuilding. So much damage was done. There was so much dishonesty and hypocrisy, and congregations full of people who were there because of fear and shame and guilt. And it reflected the power that the Catholic Church had in Irish society. And that is just not the case anymore. And the acceleration away from that, which I've commented on before, has been something to behold. But and my thinking is, just look at it for what it is. If the people who want to be there, give them your best. Give them your best self in that role. If you're the priest, and go, well, they want to be here and they're still here, so that's what counts. It's a bit of a it's the thing of, to draw an analogy back to acting. You go out there and you perform regardless of the size of the audience. People have turned up for the show, so give them a show. And that's my attitude to teaching martial arts as well. If people want to come and be taught, for me it's kind of vocational, and maybe that's the connective tissue. People have come and gone, yeah, I'm here for the thing, and you're the person who's going to give me the thing, and if I'm not here, you can't give it to me. So it is an exchange. It depends on the participant, the audience member, the congregant. It depends on someone saying, I'm here for the exchange. And it's for me, there's a purity and a kind of a nobility and a dignity in going, I'm going to give it everything I've got, no matter what. I'm going to be fully present, fully committed, fully aligned with the beliefs that informed my decision to be here in the first place, to choose this path in the first place. And then there's an opportunity for a a quality experience. There's an opportunity for a heightened, enriched, meaningful human exchange. And that also applies to teaching, by the way. Going into a classroom, I always tried to, as much as was possible, depending on who I was teaching, I always tried to bring that sort of attitude to bear. So anyway, I'm a little bit thrown. I'm a little bit thrown by that news. I don't know. Again, I mean, I mentioned an episode or two ago that to talk about grief would maybe require an entire episode. I don't feel like this is the episode that's going to focus on that, but I will say just briefly, my belief is that grief is organic, and grief needs to express itself in as natural a way as possible, in as natural a way as the individual can manage, in as natural a way as society will allow space for. And I think that's a very key component of grief, of how society observes the sort of the sanctity of death, and how it, as I said, how it allows the space or creates the space for people to mark the moment. And the further one is from the person who dies, typically it's the outer ripple of grief. But I always think of the people closest to someone who has passed away, and think their journey goes much longer. Their journey with grief lasts much longer, because the depth, the sort of profundity of the grief, it's a much larger animal to wrangle, and requires a lot of different resources, and a breadth of emotional capacity to allow it to sort of to settle, to kind of bleed out, I think, until it can sit in a place that is less painful or less overwhelming, and can sit in a place where other aspects of the relationship with that person can breathe again in a way that hurts less. So I think that, you know, the organic nature of it means it can be messy. It's not something that can just be parcelled away. And I remember writing about it before on the website, the blog, which is now defunct, by the way, just in case you're tempted to go and seek it out. But there is a new website coming soon enough-ish, kind of. It's a work in progress. And my man Daniel, hola muchacho, ¿qué tal? Daniel, my friend who has helped me with the artwork for the podcast, and he's been working on the website for a while, but has been very busy himself with his own full-time job, and is just trying to kind of squeeze in what he can do. But I know it's a priority, and that will be coming soon. But anyway, and on that will be all the old articles, the blog posts, and pieces that I put on the website over whatever it was, 8.5 years. But I remember writing about grief that there's no sort of expiry date, and there's no time span you can impose on grief. And I think it's an emotion or an experience or something that lives inside you that can surprise you with its power and its longevity. And so I just kind of go, I would never make an assumption that someone is like, are you better now? Is it done? Are you okay? Is the grief gone now? You're all happy again, is it? I just think, no, that's not really how it works, is it? So anyway, there's someone else now to mourn, sadly, and just thinking of his family members and closer friends at this time. Now, today I did have something a bit planned, as usual, a bit loosely planned. I wanted to talk about tone. Tone in, I suppose it can apply anywhere. I was thinking primarily about movies. Now, I referred a few moments ago to how the priest at that funeral service I was at, he just hit the right tone that allowed everyone to sort of feel comfortable and feel, we're in safe hands here. And it's funny, even at the graveside after the funeral, the priest had been asked just to, look, keep it fairly simple, and he did, and he kind of wrapped up and just said very simply, that's all I can do for you folks. And there was a kind of a, like, it was a funny thing to say, as in, funny, amusing, but there was a sort of a humility to the honesty of that, and a gentleness to how he said it, that again felt very appropriate. And I've observed it a couple of times at funerals. There's nothing quite like the moment when the finality, the last act of the service is a coffin being put into a grave, or the final words being said over that grave, or a coffin disappearing behind a screen in a crematorium. I feel like that people will kind of manage their emotions until that moment, and then the absolute full stop of this is the last public acknowledgement of that life, and now you're on your own, is it's very powerful, and quite confronting. I mean, contrary to this subject matter, I'm not feeling especially morbid or anything like that. I've just lost my thread there, where I was going with that. I was still talking about tone. That priest. I'm so fond of him in my mind. But that idea then of being in safe hands, I feel like tone is such an intuitive thing. The recognition of tone, it's because it's a type of energy, and it's a combination of factors that allows people to be comfortable in the setting that they recognize they're in. And it's not always about propriety, because you can strike a particular tone that might fly in the face of that, but I think it is a very particular skill. And if we're talking about movies, I think it's one of the hardest things to manage. And I was thinking about it in the context of a couple of movies. I watched or attempted to watch at the weekend. So maybe it's because my wife and daughter are away, but I thought, do you know what? I'll sit down and I'll watch. I think I've been listening to a podcast revisiting Sandra Bullock's career, and she did quite a few romantic comedies. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll watch one of those. I remember liking Sandra Bullock a lot when she kind of came to prominence in the mid-90s. And I thought, oh yeah, she's cool. And I thought she was very attractive, and I liked her persona on screen. So anyway, at the weekend, I thought, sure, look, I'll throw on an old Sandra Bullock movie. And there was one I hadn't seen on Netflix called 2 Weeks Notice. And I quickly scanned the reviews, and they were like, it's okay, it's grand. It's, she and Hugh Grant, who was the love interest opposite her, they kind of, they're a throwback to the older, maybe screwball comedies, or maybe Tracy Hepburn kind of stuff, movies that I loved growing up. And the reviews were a little bit, they were critical of the direction, saying the direction's not particularly good or imaginative, but the strength of Sandra Bullock and Hugh Grant will sustain you. So I thought, okay, I can probably handle this. Anyway, I stuck it on, and I lasted 5 minutes and 41 seconds, and I had to turn it off. It was so bad. It was so appallingly bad, and I was trying to go, what? Why is that so bad? And it was the tone, like it's the feel, the tone. Now, Sandra Bullock was fine as this sort of young, idealistic lawyer, trying to find, where she could thrive and make a difference. I didn't wait for her to meet Hugh Grant, but Hugh Grant is introduced as this, oh God, I can't even remember, but some corporate idiot at some hospital fundraiser, and he's just doing a lot of, deadpan, glib Hugh Granting all over the place. But like watching the performance, it was kind of the worst of Hugh Grant. I think when I don't know if he was phoning it in. I mean, this is what he was asked to do by the director. But there was such a sort of a deadness and inertness in his performance. There was a lack of love or energy or spark or animation, under the surface. I just thought, I cannot stay with this. I think for me, Hugh Grant, like, he was always this kind of upper class fop, kind of damp-eyed and drippy, that kind of repressed English buffoon. But then when he did About a Boy with Toni Collette and the young Nicholas Hoult, I thought he was really funny in that. I really enjoyed his performance in that, and I feel that was a bit of a a turnaround moment in his career. And in recent years, he's kind of been getting better and better, and just bringing a sort of a knowingness to his comic roles and a little edge to them. He's very funny in the second Paddington movie. And he even had fun in that really not good Guy Ritchie movie, The Gentleman, as a pretty over-the-top tabloid journalist, which was his way of getting payback for how the English tabloids had stuck their oar into his life so unscrupulously. But in any case, 5 minutes and 41 seconds, I had to bail. I was like, what the hell was I thinking? This was truly heinous. And instead, I then sat down and watched Hal Ashby's 1978 movie, Coming Home. which I'd only seen once before, probably about 30 years ago. And my memory of it was it's fundamentally a romance, that movie. Fundamentally a romance between Jane Fonda and Jon Voight as a wheelchair-bound Vietnam veteran who's lost the use of his legs. And Bruce Dern was the third cog in the sort of in the wheel of complicated love. Bruce Dern was another military man, the husband of Jane Fonda, and he is very much, the career army man. He's a captain, and you can tell he's quite self-important and has stars in his eyes about what he's going to do when he goes over. And he's pretty representative of the man, whereas Jon Voight becomes very representative of the sort of counterculture and the hippie, and sort of an antecedent of the Ron Kovic character, as portrayed by Tom Cruise in Born on the 4th of July. And the movie is imperfect, but there is a tone that is sustained throughout the movie. That means even though it's imperfect, it's very easy to stick with. And there's that great thing that a lot of 70s movie makers had in Hollywood, where they just let the camera be. They're not intrusive. Particularly Hal Ashby. And one of the opening sequences in the movie is simply a bunch of guys at the sort of veterans hospital playing pool and discussing the merits of going to Vietnam. The merits are the flaws in going to Vietnam, and he just lets the camera move around the room. These are a bunch of guys in wheelchairs playing pool and exchanging their opinions in a very naturalistic way. Jon Voight is in there, and my instinct, and I hadn't remembered from the first time I watched it, but my instinct was these are non-actors. But there was it just felt very real and very authentic. And I feel like it was a great strength of a lot of 70s movies coming out of Hollywood, that these directors just had a feel or an instinct for, it's going to let the camera be here and let this play out. And even as we transition into then the more conventional story of this kind of blossoming attraction between the sort of waspy Jane Fonda character and Jon Voight, sort of finding his anger assuaged and dampened, calmed down by the attention of Jane Fonda, who decides to volunteer at the hospital while Bruce Dern is away in Vietnam. And this sort of love develops between she and Jon Voight. And it's really nice. It's played very well. It's played very... it's pretty conventional, but it's played very gently. There's a sort of a tempo that's easy, and they're not trying to force anything. So there's just this nice chemistry between them. And even though I never for a second felt like I wasn't watching these actors, there was something, again, just about the tone of the movie that allows it to breathe. And as the movie progresses and comes to its sort of climax, it's less satisfying. And there's something just about the story itself just losing a bit of incision, and losing a bit of tightness that would have maybe brought home a more satisfying conclusion. Still some good moments at the end, but in a way I felt the Bruce Dern character was underserved a little bit, and Jon Voight, his journey to just a very kind of mellow, chilled out, thoughtful hippie type was a bit too neat. Although he has a nice scene addressing a gym full of aspiring soldiers, high school kids, where he kind of tries to explain war ain't all you think it is. But in any case, so that's Coming Home, which did it win the Oscar for best movie back in the day? It may have. I mean, that's where I would have first come to it. I remember when I left primary school. Did I mention this before? When I left primary school, my teacher gave me a little sort of mini encyclopedia, a little hand-sized, handbook called Fact Finder, and there were 2 pages in it dedicated to the Oscar winners for best movie. Was it best movie and then all the acting categories? Best actor and best actress, best supporting actor, best supporting actress. And those 2 pages became my Bible of, these are the movies I have to see. These are the movies I have to tick off as I see them to educate myself, because as a 12-year-old or 11-year-old, however old I was, I just thought that was the standard. Like, if it's won the Oscar, whether it's, if that person's won the best acting Oscar, if that movie's won the best picture Oscar, that's the standard. That's the gold standard. This stuff must be, these things have to be seen. I don't quite feel that way anymore. The Oscars, they are what they are. It's a flawed vehicle. What sort of vehicle is that? It's flawed, sir. It's flawed. But yeah, tone is the thing, and I think in comedies and romances, I think in the movies, like, tone is one of the hardest things to get right. And comedies coming out of America, certainly in recent years, and when I say recent years, I mean the last 10, 15 years, comedies have sort of just tried to do too much. And I think they present a very confused tone, where they're trying to be very sincere, sort of human stories as well as comedies. And it usually means the director feels compelled, and I'm looking at you, Judd Apatow. It usually feels the director is compelled to stick an extra 45 to 50 minutes onto the running time. And there's nothing quite like there's nothing quite like too much time to take all the humour out of a joke. So I mean, and certainly that's something I'm guilty of. But tone, and then like romances that maybe are just too wet and drippy and soggy, and it's funny. I was thinking like two movies that I liked. I mean, I really, really liked, and I've mentioned this before, and I still haven't gone and done the research to find out why it's not really, doesn't seem to be that popular with critics of note. But Silver Linings Playbook, David O. Russell's movie from, what year was that? Was that 2010, 11, 12? Silver Linings Playbook, and coincidentally another movie starring Bradley Cooper, his own A Star Is Born, which both movies I really, really like. And A Star Is Born I'm going to throw into the romance category, and I think Bradley Cooper just nailed the tone. He nailed the tone so well. And in Silver Linings Playbook, which is sort of romantic comedy or dramedy, if you prefer, I really like the tone of that movie as well. And they're two very different Bradley Cooper performances. Like his sort of high octane intensity, his kind of manicness in Silver Linings Playbook serves the comic elements very well. And I like his chemistry with Jennifer Lawrence, who brings her own thing, her own kind of her own sort of directness and frankness and strength as a performer to proceedings, which makes her more than an equal for Bradley Cooper, who can be a very strong flavour as a performer. There's no doubt about that. But then when you look at his performance in A Star Is Born, opposite Lady Gaga, who she was revelatory in that, with what she brought. Just a real nice, warm, human performance. And his kind of druggy, drinky, spiralling out of control performance was, I thought, was brilliant. And very affecting. And his struggle with alcoholism and his struggle with depression and guilt and shame, and how poorly he treats Ali, the Lady Gaga character, at different times. I believed it, and I thought the tone, maybe until the very end. I don't love the end of that movie. But that said, the end of the movie, and I did a whole episode on A Star Is Born and the other versions, the other movie versions of A Star Is Born. I did an episode on that last year where I kind of looked at the strengths and weaknesses of the other movies. But for me, those two movies, Silver Linings Playbook and A Star Is Born, the Bradley Cooper version from, again, I lose track of the years of recent movies. That must have been 2000 and what? Was it 2017? 2018? Really, really, really good. And to bring it back to the feeling of we're in the right place and the people in charge are putting us at ease and they're managing things well, and this is the right vibe, this is the right tone, so I can park my reservations. I mean, that's kind of what it is, isn't it? I can park my reservations, I can relax that part of my brain that is kind of on high alert, because it's all good. And as I say, that doesn't only pertain to movies. You know, if I think about the talking about Bruce Springsteen and Bono last week and Spike Lee, these are guys who are masters of their own tone and very comfortable with their own brand of storytelling, very comfortable with their vocation, which, sure, there's I think there's a necessary egotism with any creative person, with any artist, and I believe I was looking at the response of an old acting colleague of mine who's now the co-director of the National Theatre here in Ireland, Mark O'Brien, was dying to go and see, but he's a huge U2 fan, and he was dying to go and see Bono do his show about his kind of his life story, based, this autobiography he's just written, and he's doing a show with it, and Mark was raving about Bono's performance and how he could have been as great an actor as he has been a sort of a rock and roll man, and And I mean, Bono is a certain tone, and I'm not sure if I can handle it, even though I was acknowledging the things I respect about his consistency over the last 40 odd years. But tone, it's, I mean, of course it can be on another level. Tone can just be an auditory experience. We're talking about sounds and sensitivity to sounds. I had 2 migraines over 3 days or 4 days. No, 3. Sunday, migraine on Sunday, no migraine Monday, migraine on Tuesday. Very strange. I've only started kind of getting migraines recently in my life. I don't get them that often, thankfully. They're they're pretty disruptive. But I had my second migraine in 3 days yesterday. And at a certain point, I was outside and a house alarm went off across the road. And the tone of that alarm was hitting me in my guts. And I know it was because I had a migraine. On another day, it wouldn't have bothered me so much. And there was a horse in a field across from the house. And when the alarm went off, the horse started jumping around the field like it was highly agitated. It did so subsequently calm down. And then at a certain point, that alarm went off. I didn't even notice. I was just like, oh, the alarm's gone off. As in turned off. But the idea of tone just being something auditory, something sensory that doesn't allow us to settle again. I was listening to something. Where was I? I was doing something, and there was a tone in my ears that was like a deep rumble, like the rumble of, if you've ever been on a big ship or a car ferry. I remember travelling over to London as a child, and you travel from Dunleary to Holyhead in Wales, and then get a train from Holyhead down to London, over to London, across to London. And I remember I used to love being on the ship, the car ferry, before it left port, and you'd be on it for a while before everyone was on board and they closed the doors, and then the engine would kick in, and there'd just be this deep rumble from the bottom of the boat. And I used to think, oh, it's the coolest sound. And then that rumble, that kind of hum, the deep hum and rumble of the engine moving that huge vessel through the water, I just used to think it would remain for the entire journey. And I used to think it is the coolest thing. And I was thinking then last week, whatever I was doing, however I ended up with that sound in my ears of this kind of rumbly hum, I was like, oh, for me anyway, I thought that's a very soothing sound. It's very comforting. And of course, it's a vibration, isn't it? Like, that's the thing. And of course, then it comes back to then a vibe, and it's energy, and it's something that we feel. And so when there can be the temptation to dismiss that sort of hippie vernacular of the vibe, I felt a bad vibe. I didn't like the vibes I was getting, and we can be a bit, I say we, I mean I. I can be a bit dismissive and caustic around, the use of that word, and it can fall into a sort of a stereotype of hippie drippiness. But in actual fact, underneath it all, of course, I'm a big hippie myself. I'm all about the love. And I'm all about that sensitivity to vibe. The vibe, like the vibe is right or the vibe is wrong. And I think we all get it. I think intuitively, it's a very instinctive, intuitive, animal response. So yeah, the idea of a vibe, like in the house at the moment, in #blessed, Like I've got these kind of comedy vibes with, we've got the older cat, Marlon, who is, who must be pretty much senile at this point. And sometimes she just doesn't seem to know what she wants to do or where she wants to be. But whatever it is, it seems to involve her going to the door to be let out as soon as I sit down. So I'll sit down, having done whatever domestic stuff I have to do. I'm going, okay, cool, I can sit down now and have a coffee, or I can sit down now and eat my dinner. And then this cat will be wailing at the door to be let out. And I go, I don't think you want to go out, it's lashing rain. But I'll let her out and off she goes. Or I'll have just rescued her from outside and brought her back in, and then she goes straight back to the door. No, I want to go out. And I'm like, what is in your head, you crazy old cat? And that's fine. So whatever I have to do to deal with her, I do. And then there's the other lunatic, the kitten, who's like whatever, over a year old. That's Ruby. And she has a few tricks up her sleeve, and she has been sticking them in my face recently. So her one might be to just suddenly appear at the window, claws into the bottom of the window pane, to, big dark eyes looking in at you, set in a furry head. And she'll be kind of hanging on for dear life by her little claws and kind of looking at you like, are you going to let me in or what? And I'm like, yeah, of course I'll let you in. Just give me a second. And then she comes in, and the first thing she does is she'll try and go and eat whatever food is left in the other cat's bowl, which is verboten, as they say in Germany. And so I have to try and stop her doing that. That can involve some cruelty to cats. I'm joking, okay? Everyone relax. I'm not cruel to the cats. But she came in the other day, and I think I'd given her breakfast. And she came in, I let her in, and I was like, you're not getting any more food. Don't even be looking for it. And she looked at me kind of going, I'm not going to mess with this guy. And I could see her sniffing around the other cats. So I put the other cat's bowl away. Grand. And I'm like sitting down to have my breakfast. I think, okay, I just did a quick mental check. And I was like, okay, there's nothing out. Because she likes to get up on the counter and lick the butter. She likes to get up on the... I'm going to say it again. She likes to get up on the counter and lick the butter. So I have, on occasion, found tongue marks on the butter. That abrasive cat's tongue, the sandpaper cat's tongue, licked all over a block of butter that's been left exposed on the counter. So make sure the butter's covered. That's grand. So I'm delighted with myself, and I'm thinking I haven't left anything exposed in the kitchen, which is out of my line of vision. And I'm thinking, cool, everyone's under control. The greedy kitten isn't going to get any more food than she deserves or needs. And I'm just eating me whatever, having me toast or coffee or whatever. And the cat's kind of gone towards the kitchen. And then a few moments later emerges from that side of the room. And I can see she stops. She kind of stops and looks at me, and then she's kind of licking her paw. And licking her chops, as they say. And I'm like, what the hell? What could she have got into? Because that's the sign of a cat who's just eaten something and is feeling pretty pleased with itself. So I went into the kitchen, and then I realised I'd left the jug of milk, a jug of milk beside the coffee machine. That just a little bit of jug in a milk, a little bit of milk in a jug that I was going to use to froth the milk for my coffee. And the bloomin' kitten had jumped up beside the coffee machine and had sat there dipping her paw in the jug and licking it and having a great time. And so I go over, and it's just like these little, paw prints and spilt, drips of milk around the jug. And I was going, oh, you little... I won't use the language I used. But I had to take my hat off and go, well played, madam, well played. You got me there. Tone. The tone is a comedy tone. Yeah, so trying to manage these cats. And then on the other side of the room, you have the guinea pigs chirruping away, going, where's the grass, man? Come on, we need our weed. We need our weed. Give it to us, bro. We're ready. We're ready. We've got the vibe right in our little compound. Give us the weed. So, but they kind of take care of themselves, those guinea pigs. And then I've got the chickens. just to complete the picture, I've got the chickens on lockdown because of the bird flu that's in Ireland at the moment, and the chickens have to be locked down, so they're up in their coop, and they're just, I guess they're the survival team at the moment, because they're up there, just the three of them, Bobo, Charlotte, and Edwina the rooster. Bit of confusion there around the gender, but whatever. They're up there in the coop doing their own thing, looking pretty scraggly because the weather's been pretty rough. They choose to roost on top of the hen house and not go inside it, even though there's a lovely bed of sawdust in there for them. So I drop in on them once a day just to check, see how things are going, give them some chicken feed, replenish their water stocks. And I don't find them that cuddly, the chickens, and I'm a bit paranoid about what might be, lurking in their feathers. And one of them, I mentioned a few weeks ago, one of them has been shedding. Her feathers are coming back. She's starting to look quite handsome. That's a handsome chicken. So yeah, it's comedy critters down here in #blessed. Now, I mentioned the block of butter, and that reminded me, I had a big bowl of porridge this morning, and I put a knob of butter in my porridge. What do you think of that? That's something that somebody put me onto years ago. I think 96. The summer of 96. I was down in Thomastown in the county of Kilkenny, and I was larking around pursuing a girl down there, and one of her friends, a puppet maker called Tommy, said, "Did you ever put a bit of butter in your porridge?" So I tried that, and it was very nice, and I was reminded of it. Somehow it came to mind recently, and I said, oh yeah, I'll try that again. Just a little knob of butter in the porridge to give it a bit of a butterscotchy flavour. It's quite tasty. And I was thinking about that sentence, a knob of butter in your porridge. And I was trying to put that into a tone context. A tone. And I just thought it was ripe for ridiculousness. Particularly if you jump to the obvious wrong note of bit of old sexual innuendo. How are you? Did you ever stick a knob of butter into your oats? I love the way it melts. I love the way it oozes and mixes in with the oatmeal. The porridge, it gets all sticky. Do you like that? Do you ever like a bit of butter in your oats? Good luck. Now listen, one final thing, okay? One final thing in this area of tone. And this may be a recurring theme over the next couple of episodes. And I'm going to try not to stay too long on it, because it gets me too revved up. The Qatar Bloodfest 2022 continues to roll on after an inauspicious prologue. I'm not watching it, basically. I just find it hard to let my love of football, my enjoyment of football, I'm finding it hard to let that trump the sense of wrongness about this tournament. I'm finding it hard to permit myself to watch the football, because the whole thing just seems so steeped in blood and disregard for human life, based on the number of migrant workers who are reported to have died during the building of the stadiums in Qatar. The stink of corporate greed and hypocrisy coming from FIFA, the World Soccer Organization, the sort of aggression of the sort of forward-facing representatives of Qatar, basically saying this is how we are, like it or lump it. We got the tournament, and you can basically feck off if you don't like our culture and our stances on women's rights, workers' rights, gay rights. And the ultimate FU was also, we've decided at the 11th hour that we're not going to allow alcohol in the stadiums. Now, for me, as someone who struggles with alcohol getting a green light in certain cultures to ridiculous extents, there was a part of me that just goes, yeah, grand, because I don't go to sport. When I go to sports events, I never ever have that association of, yeah, I'm going to drink my head off because that'll enhance my enjoyment of this experience. I'm there for the sport and that's it. And drinking doesn't add to it for me. So I don't particularly have any issue with no alcohol being allowed in, particularly when for some members of the sporting fan base, that's a massive generalisation, but some members of the sporting fan base and the soccer fan base, that drunkenness can morph into something very nasty and sinister and messed up. And you got to remind yourself that children go to sports events, and when you've got drunken sports fans taking the lid off and they become all id and just vent their anger and rage and disgust and seem to access an extraordinary vocabulary of expletives with which to damn the players that have let them down and bring that rage to bear on how they communicate that. It's pretty ugly stuff. It's pretty ugly energy. And it's definitely not the right vibe. So I'm like, okay, no booze at the stadium. For me, no big deal. And I have read some people responding to that online and kind of saying the same thing. Well, it's not part of my belief system, or it's a religious thing, or it's part of my faith. So it'll be nice to go to a stadium and not to have to be faced with that. So that's that one is, there are some merits to that, but overall the sense when you're listening to the head of FIFA, Gianni Infantino, trying to do this sort of public relations management and spin the sort of media disaster, really, that the Qatar World Cup is, trying to spin that into something else and trying to knock away the accusations of hypocrisy, the allegations of human rights abuses, the moral dubiousness or wrongness of gay rights being what, I can't think of the right word, not violated, but just not allowed, not being given admission, not being a part of what's there, being referred to as a disease of the mind by a Qatari representative. And you have stuff like that, and then FIFA and Infantino going, no, football, the values of football unite the world. And you're kind of going, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? It's ludicrous. The the lack of integrity, the lack of honesty, and this Egypt of a man trying to go, I am a migrant worker. I am gay. I am the wronged one. I understand. I get it. And there's a part of me that kind of goes, yeah, probably on some level he believes that. He probably believes that I know what it is to suffer. I know what it is to be discriminated against. I know what it is to be the outsider. Now, what he cited was, he cited being an Italian kid, a child of Italian parents in Switzerland. And also, if that wasn't bad enough, to be, and I know Italy is more than, it's more than the cliche of, the passionate, Italian, Latin person. I know there are other types of Italians, but let's say for argument's sake that the young Infantino was from that book of, hot-blooded, expressive, voluble, colourful Italians, and then finds himself amongst the very controlled and moderate and considered and well-behaved Swiss. I mean, that would have been, there's a conflict there, definitely. But as if that wasn't bad enough, Infantino says, and also I had a red hair and the freckles. I don't think that's what he sounds like, but in my mind, that's what he sounds like. Red hair and the freckles. And I'm like, Infantino, you and I are kin. We're brothers, because I too was a child with red hair and freckles, and now I'm a man with red hair and fewer freckles, and it's kind of, my hair is less vibrant shade of red than it once was. And one of my friends, Ian, how are you, lad? If you're listening, you may not be. I don't think you listen that often. If in fact, rarely is what I believe, and that's okay. That's your right. But I did refer to my friend Ian, whose nickname in university, given to him by overseas students from America, they referred to him as Big Red. There's Big Red. Because he's a tall man, he's a big man, and he's got a lovely head of red hair. Gorgeous. Only gorgeous. And Ian pointed this out to me. He said, Infantino, he's one of us. The red-haired, freckled lad. Maybe think of the Sherlock Holmes short story, the Red-Headed League. Isn't that's what it was called, wasn't it? The Red-Headed League. So Infantino, he's one of us. But it's strange that that's his argument, that I know what that's like, therefore shut up and play football. I mean, as if that gives any credibility to the grossness of what Qatar 2022 represents. The venality, the hypocrisy, the greed. The naked, blatant cash grab that it is, and the sports washing monstrosity that it is. Yet another state kind of going, let's put on this wonderful show and show you how lovely our culture is. And people are going, you know what? We're just calling bullshit on that. And then being told, shut up, just enjoy the football. And the players themselves basically being told you're going to be penalised if you have any sort of symbols on you, any armbands that are a very meek form of protest, to show solidarity with LGBT people, to show you're actually thinking about this. And then those footballers are told, well, if you wear that, you're going to get a yellow card. And I'm looking at you, England and Wales. They just backed down straight away. Whereas if you look at the players of the Iran national team who refused to sing their national anthem in protest at what's happening in Iran, and you thought, well, there are players with balls, there are players with the guts and with a moral core that are unafraid to take a position that could result in very severe consequences when they go back home. And if you do nothing else, if this topic interests you at all, I recommend going and seeking out the cartoons of David Squires of theguardian.com. Go and check out his most recent cartoons. There's about 4 or 5 of his most recent ones where he's focusing on all of this, focusing on exactly what I'm talking about, and what he's able to capture in 12 or 16 panels of cartoon, and his commentary, and his ability to recognize the absurdity and the kind of moral decrepitude of these organizations, these states. Hugely moving, really incisive, and I couldn't recommend them enough. And it just means you don't have to listen to someone like me or read a long-winded moralistic article. David Squires, go and check him out. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. There was one other thing I was going to say last week when I was talking about preacher men, and focusing on Bono and Bruce Springsteen, Spike Lee. I felt I wanted to say something about Bob Dylan there as well, and just point out that Bob Dylan, in my mind, he doesn't belong to that group. And Bob Dylan, as much as he was such a significant voice coming out of the folk movement, and his songs in that time spoke to the zeitgeist, and he's, there was such pressure on him to be this voice of a generation, the voice of the oppressed, but he seemed to always actively refuse that. He didn't want that mantle. He didn't want that chalice. So I felt I wanted to make that point last week, even though obviously within his writing and his amazing lyrics, that's where he communicated, and that's a big distinction. The point that I was trying to make about people like Bruce Springsteen and Bono, they were more than happy to take 10 minutes between songs to tell you a story, and that clearly showed their kind of worldview, their values, and where they were coming from. And Bob Dylan, very much not that, although so very, very brilliant in his own right. Anyway, there you go. I'll leave you with that. Okay, that's it for another week. Thank you very much for listening, and go and leave a response. Leave a response there on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or wherever. Send me an email at theclearoutlive@gmail.com. And if you like what you hear, if you're a regular listener and you feel, do you know what, this is a good product, you can support this. You can support it, by just throwing me the price of an old sandwich. Or maybe that's too much. A sandwich is probably very expensive. I rarely eat out. But you can support me using the Patreon link. That's patreon.com/theclearout. And there's also a supporter link, which is an Acast option to make a one-off contribution to the tell. So please do, if you're so motivated. But otherwise, just keep listening. Otherwise, just spread the word. Give it a recommend to someone else. And just throw me some love on social media. I'd really appreciate it. It just helps kind of grow this thing and nurture it, and makes me feel, it's reaching people. And as I say, I'll keep doing it because I value this thing, and I value wellness with attitude, which is what this always is and continues to be. Okay, do take care of yourselves. Do mind yourselves. And if you, maybe if you're dealing with some tough stuff, maybe if you're dealing with loss, bereavement, just hold yourself gently, give yourself time, and let it be what it is. You'll get to the other side, and it's all part of who we are, and that's not something to be afraid of. Okay, there you go. That's it. That's the final note. I'll leave you with that tone. Okay, take it easy. I will talk to you next week. All the best. See you. Bye.